Week 2 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units I would start this week. The first one, the San Francisco 49ers. Week 1, it was a good outing for them, winning that game 17-13 at the Seattle Seahawks. 13 points allowed, a sack, 2 fumble recoveries. So week 2, a great matchup at the New Orleans Saints. One of the worst offenses, in my opinion, in all the NFL. They're going to be with Spencer Rattler in their quarterback. So we saw the Saints, they only scored 13 points versus a mediocre defense, the Arizona Cardinals. The defense hasn't been the same over the last few seasons, but I think they're capable in a good matchup in New Orleans to go out there and be one of the top defenses this week in the rankings and putting points up so they could get to the quarterback. I think they could hold them mid-teens, low 20s in this one as well, is San Francisco. And obviously being on the field longer with Christian McCaffrey back in the lineup, it helps the defense rest and go out there and make plays. So with all those factors, in a great matchup this week at the Saints. They're definitely a DST I would start this week. The next DST, the Baltimore Ravens. So we know Buffalo went up and down the field 41 points in that one versus the Baltimore Ravens DST in week 1, and they only had a sack, so they had negative fantasy points. Was Baltimore's defense. But this week, a great matchup versus the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco, obviously the former franchise quarterback who they won a Super Bowl with, going back a decade now, is in there for Cleveland, still at 41 years old, throwing the football all around the yard. But Baltimore, they could get to the quarterback. Buffalo, we know, is one of the best offenses in the league. We're one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the league. Josh Allen showed it once again in week 1. So I think this defense, home opener, division matchup versus a poor offense in the Cleveland Browns. They go out there and they wreak havoc and they put up a lot of fantasy points in this one after a bad loss, blowing a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter. So Baltimore definitely a start this week. The next start, the mentioned Buffalo Bills. So this week I know the New York Jets, who put up 32 points in their tough loss versus the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1, where we know the Steelers defense is supposed to be one of the better units in the league. So the Jets definitely went out there and put up points. But I think Buffalo in this one, this is going to be a tight contested game. Jets defense has played Josh Allen very well over the last few seasons. And we know Buffalo, they got the doors blown off, where obviously Baltimore rushed over 200 yards in that week 1 victory at the buzzer, 41-40. So 40 points allowed, 2 sacks, and a fumble recovery. But that was just a video game type of ball game between those two teams, where this is a division matchup, and these are usually mid-teens, low 20s, grinded out performances between both teams. So I think Buffalo, they're going to get back to basics in this one. I know Breece Hall is a good running back, but he's no Derrick Henry. And I know Justin Fields had a good week 1, but he's not in the same class, obviously, as Lamar Jackson. So Buffalo, I think their defense, they could take a breath a little bit, get back on track in this one, and I think it's a good matchup. Like I said, Justin Fields, no doubt about it, he looked good in week 1, and Breece Hall looked good. But this Buffalo defense, for the most part, they played well versus shit offenses year after year. So definitely Buffalo, a team to get in there. And their start this week, the next start, the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Chargers, I thought, played pretty decent versus the Kansas City Chiefs in the week 1 victory in Brazil. 21 points allowed, 2 sacks. I know they didn't get to the quarterback, they didn't pick the football off, but it's tough to intercept Patrick Mahomes a lot, we've seen throughout his career. But this week, a better matchup in Vegas, division matchup in Las Vegas. Los Angeles, they could get to the quarterback, led by Khalil Mack. Obviously a pretty good coverage secondary for the most part. And Geno Smith, no doubt about it, he's been an improved quarterback over the last couple seasons, and he puts a lot of yards up, and we saw it in week 1 as well, where he had over 350 yards passing the football. We know they got Ashton Ginty, obviously. We know they got Brock Bowers, even though he's banged up a little bit with the knee injury. But I think the Chargers, they're a decent start in a division matchup, where this could be a low 20s performance between these two teams. But I think they'll cause a few turnovers. I think they'll get a few sacks on Geno Smith, where this is one of the worst offensive lines in the league, is this Las Vegas Raider offensive line. And I think Los Angeles is a decent start this week in the final DSTs. The Los Angeles Rams stay in LA. So Los Angeles, they had a good performance versus the Houston Texans in week 1, with 9 points allowed, 3 sacks, an interception, in a fumble recovery. So week 2, a good matchup at Tennessee. Cam Ward, I thought he made some plays at times, but it was a tough matchup versus the Denver Broncos for him. And this is going to be a tough matchup with the Los Angeles Rams coming to town in week 2. So like I said, not many options in the offense for this Tennessee Titan team. We know they got Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, Cam Ward, but besides that, nothing going on for the most part. And after a good ball game in week 1, even though it was home versus Houston, and we know Houston, they got Stroud, got Nico Collins, but not a lot over there as well. Or as well is this Tennessee offense, where besides Pollard and Calvin Ridley, there's not much in that offense that's a threat to really hurt a defense. I think Los Angeles, I mentioned it earlier as well, they're a good waiver wire pickup and streaming option this week, and definitely a DST that's going to crack the top 12 in the rankings this week. Sets a few defense DST units I would start for week 2 of the fantasy football season.